Hey guys, and welcome back to Betwixt the Books. It is Michaela. I am here to talk to you today about some of the fanfiction that I have read recently. I haven't made a video in a little while, and we're going to ignore the fact that this video is coming out on a Thursday and not a Wednesday, because I've decided there's no rules. I'm just going to post if I feel like posting. And there's no Friday content this week, so whatever. You get this video of my face. We're going to talk about fanfiction because that's what I've been reading. If you haven't noticed by the lack of content in the last couple of months, both from me and from Gretchen, it's been a little bit rough. We live in the United States. It feels like the country is burning down around us a little bit, but that didn't stop me from reading fanfiction. So I have still been reading fanfiction. If you haven't seen any of my fanfiction content in the past, I have been heads over heels for Steddie, Steve Harrington, and Eddie Munson from Stranger Things for several years now. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And I read an obscene amount of fanfiction, and sometimes I feel like telling other people to go read things. So I've picked 3 of the things that I've read in the month of December that I enjoyed a lot and I think more people should be reading. The 3 that I'm going to talk about today go from monster fucking, which you know that I love, to alternate universe college professor tattoo artist but with a twist, and then we have some Omegaverse to round us off. Like I said, we're going to start with monster fucking. If you didn't see our last reading roundtable, we discussed a little bit about that, and I'll link that up above. But I, even in my regular books, enjoy reading romances that involve monsters. I can maybe do a video at some point talking about why I enjoy that. But one of the greats of monster fucking in the Steddie fandom put out a brand new fic. I think literally today/yesterday, depending on where you're at, because it only has about 500 views at the moment, at least of filming, which is also holiday themed because it's December, and it is a Santa Steve and Krampus Eddie fic. It is titled Not to Me, Not If It's You by AidaRonan. The author of this fic has a whole series that are all different little short bite-sized monster romance fics, which go from like Eddie being a swamp monster in the bayous of Louisiana, all the way to this most recent one, which is a holiday themed one. There's also Werewolf Steve and Vampire Eddie in there. There's just about anything in there that you could want if you're into the genre or would like to try the genre. It's a good place to go and see because it is like really good at fitting a whole bunch of lore into a really small package. For a fic that's under 15,000 words, I got a whole bunch of lore about the way that this world works, even though it's pretty much just 2 guys taking a stroll for a little while and then they have sex on the floor of a cabin. What more do you want from a Krampus romance? The lore in this particular world is that the mythical figures sort of are roles given to people, and the people can take on those roles for as long as they want. They will be functionally immortal as long as they are in those roles, and they can move on whenever they want, but moving on in that case would mean dying. The current iterations of Santa and Krampus are Steve and Eddie. We get the feeling that they did not know each other before taking this quote-unquote job, so they are getting to know each other every single Christmas where they walk together. The lore around Krampus and Santa is more or less the same. Santa comes and gives toys to good children. Krampus comes and punishes the wicked. He's not punishing children, though. He's punishing adults. And part of the magic around them is that Steve kind of cushions the kids from having to listen to the parent getting tortured. They have conversations about how Eddie kind of struggles with this. Also, when he took the job, he transformed magically into Krampus. He looks like a big hooved monster. But to other people, they don't look so much like how they look to each other. Eddie is struggling with the fact that he's now a monster. Steve likes how cute Eddie is. They have the conversation that a lot of folks who kind of touch a foot into this genre have, where Steve basically says that when the Beast turns back into a prince at the end of the Disney Beauty and the Beast, it's a downgrade for Belle. Like, she didn't fall in love with this ugly ass man. She fell in love with this beautiful monster. So they have that conversation to sort of build Eddie's confidence up. And yeah, it's an interesting one. I quite enjoyed it, and if you're looking for a festive little thing, it's worth it. And again, any of those fics are worthwhile if you go and just take a little sneak peek at it. The next fic is a more normal fic for folks who don't necessarily usually read monster fucking or Omegaverse. I know both of those are more niche genres, subgenres within the community. How Will You Know If You Found Me at Last by DiscoSuperFly. It is an alternate universe fic, like I said, set in the 2000s. It's definitely an alternate meeting, although I'm not 100% sure if there's no upside down. It doesn't say so in the tags, and Steve and Dustin do know each other, but definitely the Vecna stuff doesn't happen because Eddie does not know Steve. This is the only fic that isn't a standalone. It's a chaptered fic. It is one that I have been reading since it started coming out back in the spring of this year. So some of my memories of like the earlier chapters are a bit mushy. It's been a while, but the last chapter of the fic to make it fully completed just came out this month. So now I can talk about it with you guys. It is a twist on the normal use of this trope in the community. Generally, when we get a tattoo shop / tattoo artist person and a professor, Steve is usually the teacher type character and Eddie is usually the tattoo shop type character. We've flipped this on its head for once. Eddie teaches music at a university, the same university where Dustin teaches, and Steve does tattoo stuff, and his tattoo art is like kind of heavily inspired by upside down type creatures. Eddie sees that Dustin has a really cool tattoo, and being a person who's like a fan of tattoos would like to get a tattoo from the same artist. Silly him, it's Steve, so he's gonna go do that. What he doesn't know is that the tattoo artist that he is now going to get a new tattoo from also is the guy that he has been crushing on, that he calls Jogger Guy, who jogs in front of his house every single day. And he has a crush on this guy. They like kind of awkwardly wave to each other because he always comes out of his house about the same time that Steve is running past it. Steve, funnily enough, also has a crush on this like weird guy with the cat that he runs by every single morning, and then they have this sort of meet cute moment where they get together because of the tattoo that's going on. So it's a lot of kismet. It's a lot of like missed chances now coming all together to get them into a relationship. A lot of the characters obviously aren't in their original roles because it is an alternate universe fic. So for instance, Hopper is the guy that owns and runs the shop that Steve is currently working in, but a lot of your favorite characters will still show up and be part of this. The last chapter, which I just read this month, just came out, and it ended with a huge like charity banquet that Eddie's band helps puts on, like a battle of the bands type thing. We finally get Steve and Eddie together. They went on their first date in a previous chapter, but like they're fully definitely together at this point. And it was just really sweet. I liked the play on the tropes that we had. It's a fic that I feel like needs more views than it currently has. And yeah, it's finally finished. So for people who only read finished fics, there you go. It's a finished fic. It's there for you. I'm recommending it. Please go read it. And again, it'll be linked down below. The final fic is Omegaverse, and I know not everybody is into Omegaverse. I do feel like more people should try it. I get it, some people just don't like it, but it is an Omegaverse fic. This one is Alpha for Alpha, which is rare. Usually you get your Alpha Omega dynamics. One of them's an Omega, one of them's an Alpha. I've seen a lot of Omega Steve and Eddie, but I hadn't seen a whole lot of Alpha and Alpha. I've seen both of them be Omegas, but it's rare to see both of them being Alphas in the same fic. This last fic is called Give Me One Good Honest Kiss, parentheses, and I'll Be Alright, end parentheses, by ChristinMKay. Highly recommend this one. So, while it is still an Omegaverse fic, it still has the sort of the traps in there. It is not overly sexual fic. There are still sexual scenes. This one is much more focused on a character study of Steve, I feel like. Steve, who is suffering from chronic rejection sickness because of the way that his parents didn't treat him well as a kid and were never around. This sort of means that in all of the relationships that he's in, he's reacting to them differently than how most people would. And the fact that he is in a sort of taboo relationship with Eddie because they are both alphas and because they can't show outward affection the way that they would normally means that his like rejection sickness is flaring up. It goes through sort of the events of season 4 to the aftermath where both Steve and Eddie are in the hospital. And Eddie kind of finds out that the reason that Steve is in the hospital is not so much about the bat bites, which he had thought initially in the same way that he is in the hospital from having suffered those attacks, but more so because Steve is suffering so much from the rejection sickness that he has. Even though Eddie did not reject him, it is just the fact that he feels rejected because he's not able to love in the way that he wants to or show that love publicly. It does still have a very sexy, what I would say, oral knotting scene where there is oral sex happening and a knot happens, which is not something that happens very often. So if you're intrigued by that, totally worth reading. Definitely like super sexy. We get bratty Steve in the sexual relationships. He likes most of the time to be a good boy for Eddie. He's still in a submissive role, but sometimes he likes to make Eddie work for it. And we like to see cute BDSM dynamics being used. It was really sweet and heartfelt. There was a lot of like bits and pieces of that I super loved in looking at how parts of the Omegaverse universe can be used to further look at the way that characters interact with each other and how that might manifest in a alternate universe that is very different from our own, when there are physical repercussions for not getting enough love, when you physically get sick from not being loved in the right way, and how societal pressures and things like that will create more problems than they will fix. The way that they write Steve is so, I feel like, really hit at the core of the character for like how I view Steve. The way that Steve loves so much and like shows that love to Eddie. He calls Eddie his alpha, which is like an honorific. Like he gives himself over to Eddie, but in a lot of ways he doesn't feel like Eddie's alpha. Like he doesn't feel like he's getting that love back to him. I don't know, I just really appreciated it. Rejection sickness is one of the parts of Omegaverse that I really like when people like focus on and use in their fics. And Steve is a great character to give rejection sickness, I feel like. I like Omegaverse fics that focus a little bit more on those smaller social dynamics that we don't see so often, because again, a lot of them do seem to focus more on the like sexy heat rut type stuff. Not that there isn't sexy stuff in this, but because we're focusing more on like the social dynamics and other things that go on in an established universe like the Omegaverse, it's just interesting and it's worth a read. If you've never read an Omegaverse fic, this is definitely one that I think that you could read and enjoy. And if you don't understand it, come back and ask me questions because I can talk about it. I'm sure anybody that reads and writes Omegaverse stuff likes to talk about it. It's like such an interesting thought experiment. And again, I know it's like kind of squicky for a lot of people, but if you give it a try, most people get hooked. I feel like if you're willing to give it a try, you can kind of see where the good stuff comes out of it. And then it's starting to kind of flow into the real world, because I made a video where I talked about Bride by Ellie Hazelwood this year, which is like Omegaverse light for people who may not read fanfiction. So yeah, it's like kind of starting to trickle out into other places, and you might see it there. So yeah, those are the 3 fics that I think need some more love. More people should be reading them. One of them is brand spanking new. The other one is still new, came out this month. And the third one is just one that finished up, that's been going all year round. Hopefully you enjoyed this, that you get to go read something that's super like great and that you love. And there was something in here that appeals to you, or that you can try something new. and I will be around. Gretchen and I are going to have a reading roundtable next week, and that's the last one for the year, and then we're planning to do our wrap-up of our reading challenge for the year, so there's definitely stuff coming up, even if there isn't another solo video this year yet. I don't know. I don't have plans. I might do something. We'll see. We are getting close to, like, what is our wrap-up of our reading in general for the year, so maybe I'll do, like, my reading wrap-up type thing. But some fan fiction for you from December, something to go read, something to keep you distracted during the holidays, maybe. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.